Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the mud, the smoke, and the slow, grinding misery of being a Civil War soldier, where your grand ideas of glory last about 5 minutes, and then reality hits you like a wet sock to the face. You're standing in line, clutching gear that already feels too heavy, surrounded by men who look just as unsure as you feel. Some are barely older than boys. Others are farmers who've never left their county. And you're starting to suspect that signing up for this might not have been your brightest moment because, well, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin with a sense of purpose. That's the first thing they hand you, before the rifle, before the uniform. It's not written down, but it's everywhere. The speeches, the flags, the drums beating somewhere just out of rhythm with your heart. You tell yourself you're here for something bigger. Everyone does. But then the waiting starts. Training camp is not what you imagined. There's no heroic music, no perfectly lined formations, just dust, shouting officers, and confusion. You try to stand straight, but the man next to you keeps shifting, scratching at his collar like it's made of sandpaper, which honestly, it might as well be. Your uniform doesn't fit properly. It's either too tight across the shoulders or hanging off you like borrowed clothes. The wool scratches constantly, even when you're standing still. And standing still happens a lot. You stand in line to eat. You stand in line to get your gear. You stand in line because someone told you to stand in line. And already, you're tired. A real historical detail sneaks in here. Most Civil War soldiers on both sides had little to no formal military training when they enlisted. You're not joining a polished army. You're part of something being built on the fly, held together with guesswork and loud commands. You're handed a rifle. It's heavier than you expected. You try to look like you know what you're doing, but your grip feels awkward. Around you, others fumble just as much. Someone drops theirs, and the clatter echoes louder than it should, like the sound of confidence cracking. Drills begin, marching, turning, stopping, over and over again. The sun climbs higher, pressing down on your neck. Sweat collects under your collar, sliding down your back in slow, irritating trails. Your boots, new and stiff, rub your heels raw. Blisters form quickly. They don't care about your enthusiasm. At night, you lie down on rough ground or thin bedding, staring up at the sky. It's quieter then, but not peaceful. There's always someone coughing, someone shifting, someone whispering about home. Home already feels far away. And here's something odd, something you wouldn't expect. Many soldiers wrote letters almost obsessively in these early days, not because they had much to say, but because writing made everything feel a little more real, a little more anchored. You find yourself doing it too, scratching out words by dim light, trying to describe something you don't fully understand yet. Everything is fine, you might write, even though it isn't. Food is your next reality check, but that horror deserves its own spotlight later. For now, it's enough to notice that meals are irregular, portions are questionable, and the taste, well, let's just say you stop expecting flavor pretty quickly. You start to notice the smell of the camp. It's subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Sweat, dirt, unwashed clothes, and something else, something sour that lingers in the air. Hygiene is not exactly a priority here. Time stretches strangely. Days blur together. You lose track of what day it is, but you never lose track of how long it's been since you last felt comfortable. And then there's the officers. Some seem confident, barking orders with practiced authority. Others, not so much. You can tell they're figuring things out as they go, just like you are. Scholars still argue whether the early leadership on both sides was more harmful than helpful, especially in these initial stages, where organization was, at best, a polite suggestion. You try not to think about that too much. Instead, you focus on the small things, adjusting your gear so it doesn't dig into your shoulder quite as badly, learning how to sit in a way that doesn't make your legs ache, figuring out which spots in camp get a little more breeze. These tiny victories matter more than you expected. There's a strange mix of emotions building inside you. Excitement hasn't vanished completely. It flickers now and then, especially when you hear distant rumors of movement, of action, of something finally happening. But it's layered with something heavier: doubt. You start to realize that this isn't a story where everything makes sense. There's no clear path, no guarantee that effort equals survival. You look around at the faces near you, trying to imagine who will still be here in a month. You stop that thought quickly, because even in these early days, before a single shot is fired in your direction, something has already changed. You're not just watching history anymore, you're inside it. And it doesn't feel grand or glorious. It feels uncomfortable, uncertain, and just a little bit frightening. The nights grow longer, or maybe it just feels that way. You pull whatever blanket you have tighter around you, listening to the low hum of the camp settling down. Somewhere nearby, someone snores loudly. Another man mutters in his sleep. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will probably be the same. More drills, more waiting, more adjusting to a life you didn't fully understand when you stepped into it. And yet, beneath it all, there's a quiet realization forming. This is just the beginning. The real hardships, the hunger, the sickness, the chaos, they're still ahead, waiting for you to catch up. For now, you rest. Or at least you try to. Morning arrives without asking your permission. You don't wake up refreshed. You surface, slowly, reluctantly, like someone pulled from the bottom of a murky pond. Your back aches from the ground, your neck protests every movement, and your mouth feels dry enough to make you question if you swallowed sand in your sleep. Then you remember, this is normal now. And almost immediately, your stomach reminds you of something even more important. It's empty. Not just "I could eat" empty, it's a hollow, gnawing sensation that seems to echo through your entire body. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and glance around. Others are already stirring, some moving with purpose, others dragging themselves into consciousness like you. Breakfast is coming. That thought should be comforting. It isn't. You shuffle toward the distribution area, joining a line that forms with surprising speed. Lines, you've learned, are the backbone of military life, and this one determines how miserable the next few hours will be. When you finally reach the front, you're handed your ration. This is where expectations fully collapse. Hardtack. It doesn't look like food so much as it looks like a building material, a small, square biscuit, if you're feeling generous, that's been baked until it's essentially immortal. You turn it over in your hand, noticing the tiny holes punched into it, like some kind of strange, edible brick. You tap it against your palm. It taps back. A real historical fact slips quietly into your awareness. Hardtack was a staple ration during the Civil War because it could last for months, even years, without spoiling. Unfortunately, that durability came at the cost of taste, texture, and occasionally your dental health. You take a bite. Or at least you try to. Your teeth hesitate. The biscuit resists. There's a moment, a brief negotiation between you and this stubborn square of flour before something finally gives. It's not the hardtack. It's your expectations. The taste is bland. Painfully, aggressively bland. It's like eating the idea of food rather than food itself. Dry crumbs crumble reluctantly in your mouth, sticking to your tongue, your teeth, the roof of your mouth. You chew, slowly, carefully. Around you, others have developed techniques. One man dunks his hardtack into a tin cup of coffee, if you can call it that, softening it just enough to make it chewable. Another taps his biscuit against the edge of a crate, breaking it into smaller, slightly less threatening pieces. You try dunking yours. It helps. A little. The coffee itself is weak, more like vaguely flavored water than anything you'd recognize from home. Still, it's warm, and that alone feels like a small mercy. But then comes the protein. Salt pork. You receive a chunk of it and immediately notice the sheen. It glistens in a way that suggests less fresh meat and more questionable life decision. You sniff it cautiously. It smells strong. Salty, yes, but also something deeper, something that lingers in your nose longer than you'd like. Here's the reality. This meat has likely been preserved for a long time, packed in salt to keep it from spoiling. Fresh food is rare out here. What you get is what survives the journey. You take a bite anyway. It's tough, chewy, intensely salty, so much so that your mouth almost recoils. You chew longer than seems reasonable, your jaw starting to ache slightly as you try to break it down into something swallowable. You begin to understand why hunger is such a powerful motivator, because despite all of this, you keep eating. There's an odd detail you notice after a few meals like this. Some soldiers actually come to prefer certain types of spoiled food, not because they taste good, but because they taste like something. When your baseline is near flavorless, even a slightly off taste can feel like variety. You're not there yet, but give it time. Lunch and dinner don't improve things much. Sometimes you get beans, sometimes rice. Occasionally, if luck is feeling generous, there's a bit of fresh bread or vegetables, but those moments are rare enough to feel like small celebrations. More often, it's repetition. Hardtack, salt pork, coffee. Again and again and again. Your body starts to change in subtle ways. The constant lack of proper nutrition leaves you feeling weaker, though it's hard to pinpoint at first. You tire more easily, your muscles don't recover as quickly. That persistent hunger never fully goes away. It just becomes a quiet companion, always present, always whispering. And then come the worms. Not every piece of hardtack has them, but enough do that it becomes a known issue. Tiny, wriggling inhabitants that have made your ration their home. The first time you notice one, you freeze. You stare. It stares back. Or at least it continues existing in a way that feels deeply personal. You look around, unsure what to do. The man next to you shrugs. "Extra protein," he mutters. You're not sure if he's joking. Some soldiers tap their hardtack on a surface to knock the worms out. Others don't bother. Hunger, again, has a way of lowering standards you once thought were non-negotiable. You hesitate. Then you tap your biscuit a few times, watching a couple of tiny shapes fall away. Good enough. You eat. Water, when you get it, isn't always clean. Streams and rivers nearby serve as sources, but they're also used for washing, for animals, for things you'd rather not think about while drinking. You try not to look too closely, because you're thirsty, and thirst doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Scholars still argue whether poor nutrition or unsanitary conditions played the bigger role in weakening soldiers before battle. But standing here, chewing on something that might outlive you, it feels like both are working together quite efficiently. The days stretch on, marked by meals that don't satisfy and hunger that doesn't fade. You begin to measure time differently, not by hours or drills, but by how long it's been since you last ate and how long until you can eat again. It's a simple system, and a brutal one. You catch yourself thinking about food from home, real food, warm bread that yields easily under your fingers, meat that doesn't fight back, meals that come with flavor, with comfort, with a sense of fullness that doesn't disappear an hour later. Those memories feel distant now, almost unreal. You swallow another bite of hardtack, chasing it with a sip of thin coffee, and try to focus on the present. This is what you have. This is what keeps you going. Barely. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, a quiet thought begins to form, not loud enough to demand attention, but persistent enough to linger. If this is what feeding an army looks like, you're starting to wonder what the rest of this experience will demand from you. Because if even eating feels like a challenge, what happens when things get truly difficult? You take another bite. You don't have an answer yet. By now, you've stopped expecting comfort. Not just from food, but from anything. The camp has settled into a rhythm, if you can call it that. It's less like a well-organized system and more like a collection of habits everyone has quietly agreed to follow because there's no better option. You wake, you move, you wait, you eat if you're lucky, and then you do it all over again. Days stretch out, not in excitement, but in repetition. You notice it most in the mornings, not because they're particularly different, but because they're exactly the same. The same groggy lising, the same stiff joints, the same slow realization that yes, you are still here, and yes, this is still your life. You sit up, brushing dirt from your clothes, though it never really leaves, and glance around. The camp looks worn, not just physically, though there's plenty of that, but emotionally, like it's tired of itself. Tents sag slightly, their fabric dulled by dust and use. The ground is packed hard from constant footsteps, patches of mud forming where water lingers just long enough to be inconvenient. There's a kind of dull grayness to everything, even when the sun is out. And the smell? Well, it's worse now. At first it was just noticeable. Now it's unavoidable. A thick mix of sweat, waste, damp earth, and unwashed bodies that hangs in the air like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave. You don't notice it all the time, not consciously, but every now and then it hits you again, and you're reminded just how far you are from anything resembling clean. Bathing is occasional. If there's a nearby river or stream, you might get the chance to wash, but it's not exactly a private spa experience. Dozens of men crowd the same water, splashing, scrubbing, trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy. The water itself isn't always clean, but it's better than nothing. And better than nothing has become a guiding principle. There's an odd detail you pick up on after a while. Some soldiers wear the same clothes for weeks, sometimes longer, without a proper wash. Not out of laziness, but because there's simply no practical way to keep things clean. You start to understand why lice become such common companions. Yes, lice. At first, it's just an itch, a small, annoying distraction you can ignore. But then it spreads. You scratch your arm, then your neck, then your scalp. Others are doing the same, though no one really talks about it. Until someone does. You overhear a conversation, half complaint, half resignation, about graybacks, the nickname soldiers give to lice. The tone isn't shocked or disgusted, it's casual, familiar, like they're talking about the weather. You check your clothes later, carefully, trying not to make it obvious, and there they are. Tiny, persistent reminders that your living conditions have officially crossed into deeply unpleasant. You brush them off, for now. Daily life fills with small tasks, mostly chores. You help gather firewood, clean equipment, dig trenches or latrines. None of it feels heroic. There's no glory in hauling supplies or scraping mud off your boots. But these tasks matter, because without them, things would fall apart even faster than they already threaten to. A real historical fact quietly fits into place here. Civil War camps often struggled with proper sanitation, and while some commanders enforced cleanliness rules, many camps lacked the structure or discipline to maintain them consistently. The result? Conditions that made discomfort feel like the baseline. You start to appreciate the rare moments of downtime, not because they're particularly enjoyable, but because they're yours. You sit with a few others, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same space. Conversations drift. Home comes up often, not in dramatic speeches, but in small details. Someone mentions a meal they miss, another talks about a sibling, a field, a road they used to walk. You listen.
And sometimes you add your own memories to the mix. There's something comforting about it, not enough to erase where you are, but enough to remind you that there's a world beyond this camp, a world that still exists, even if it feels very far away. But boredom is a strange thing. It creeps in slowly, filling the gaps between activity and rest. You find yourself staring at nothing, lost in thought, or counting small, meaningless things just to pass the time. The days don't just feel long, they feel heavy. And yet, underneath that boredom, there's tension, a quiet, constant awareness that this isn't permanent, that something is coming. Orders will change, movement will happen. The stillness isn't peace, it's a pause. Scholars still argue whether this prolonged waiting helped or harmed soldiers' morale. Some say it gave them time to adjust. Others believe it only amplified anxiety, letting fear grow in the absence of action. From where you're sitting, scratching at an itch that refuses to go away, it feels like a bit of both. You start to notice how people cope. Some lean into routine, finding comfort in predictability. Others joke more, their humor a little sharper, a little more frequent, like they're trying to keep something at bay. A few grow quieter, retreating into themselves, speaking less as the days go on. You wonder which one you are. Sleep doesn't come easily, not because you're not tired, you are, but because your body never fully relaxes. The ground is hard, the air is noisy, and there's always that underlying awareness that you're not entirely safe, even here. You shift, trying to find a position that doesn't aggravate something. It doesn't exist. So you settle for less uncomfortable. And then there are the sounds. Coughing again, more frequent now. Someone clearing their throat repeatedly. The rustle of movement as others try to get comfortable. Occasionally, laughter. Short bursts that fade quickly. It's never truly quiet. You lie there, staring into the darkness, and realize something subtle but important. You're getting used to this. Not because it's good, but because it's consistent. The discomfort, the boredom, the smells, the routines, they've become familiar. And familiarity, even when unpleasant, has a strange way of making things feel manageable. At least for now. Because deep down, you know this isn't the worst part. This is just the waiting room. And as uncomfortable as it is, as tedious and irritating and exhausting as camp life can be, there's a quiet understanding settling in your mind. Things can get worse. Much worse. You turn onto your side, pulling your thin covering closer, trying to ignore the itch, the ache, the noise. Tomorrow will be the same. Until it isn't.
At first, it's just a cough. Nothing dramatic, just a rough, persistent sound that cuts through the usual background noise of the camp. You hear it in the morning while you're half awake, again during drills, and later at night when everything is supposed to quiet down. You don't think much of it. People cough. It happens. But then you notice it's not just one person. It's several. And then it's everywhere. The camp, already uncomfortable, begins to feel fragile, like something invisible is moving through it, brushing past each man without asking permission. You start to pick up on patterns. Someone who looked fine yesterday now lying down longer than usual. Another moving slower, quieter, their energy drained in a way that feels deeper than simple fatigue. Disease doesn't announce itself with drums or orders. It just arrives. A real historical fact settles into place here, heavy and unavoidable. During the Civil War, more soldiers died from disease than from battle, not by a small margin either. Illness was the true enemy, one you couldn't see, couldn't fight directly, and often couldn't escape. You feel that reality creeping closer. Sanitation, if it could be called that, isn't holding up well. Latrines are dug, yes, but not always far enough from living areas. Waste seeps into the ground, into the water sources. Flies gather in thick, buzzing clouds, moving freely between things you'd rather they didn't connect. You wave them away absent-mindedly. They come back. Water, which you already didn't trust, becomes even more suspicious. You still drink it because you have to, but now there's a hesitation, a brief pause before each sip, like your body is trying to warn you about something your mind doesn't fully grasp. Then come the fevers. You notice a man nearby shivering, even though the day is warm. His hands tremble slightly as he tries to hold onto his cup. Someone offers him a blanket, which he takes with a weak nod. Later, you see him sweating, not the normal kind, the kind that comes from heat or exertion, but a heavy, soaking sweat that clings to his clothes and makes his skin shine in a way that feels wrong. You start to understand. This isn't just a bad day. This is something else. An odd, almost surreal detail emerges in these moments. Soldiers sometimes gave nicknames to illnesses, softening them into something more manageable. Camp fever, the runs, the ague. The names sound almost casual, but the reality behind them is anything but. Diarrhea, what they politely call the runs, spreads quickly, faster than you'd expect, faster than feels possible. It weakens men rapidly, draining them in ways that are both physically exhausting and deeply humiliating. You see it happen. Men who were standing beside you days ago, now barely able to move, their strength gone, their faces pale and drawn. There's a kind of quiet desperation in their eyes, like they're trying to hold on to something that keeps slipping away. You keep your distance, not out of cruelty, out of instinct. But distance doesn't guarantee safety. Scholars still argue whether the primary cause of these outbreaks was poor sanitation, contaminated water, or the sheer density of men living in close quarters. Standing here, watching another man struggle to sit up, it feels like the answer is simple. All of it. It's all working together. You start to notice your own body more carefully. Every small sensation becomes suspect. A slight headache, you wonder if it's the beginning of something worse. A moment of dizziness, you pause, steadying yourself, waiting to see if it passes. It usually does, but the doubt lingers. The medical setup in camp isn't exactly reassuring. There are surgeons, yes, and assistants, but they're overwhelmed, constantly. There's always someone new needing attention, someone else deteriorating faster than expected. You watch as a sick man is helped toward a makeshift medical area. It's not a proper building, just a space set aside, filled with cots and the faint lingering smell of sickness layered over everything else. You don't follow. You don't want to see too much, because once you do, you can't unsee it. The pace of life in camp shifts subtly. It slows, but not in a restful way, more like something dragging its feet. Conversations become quieter. Laughter, when it appears, feels shorter, less frequent. You notice gaps, places where someone used to sit, now empty. It's easier to think that way, but then someone mentions a name in past tense, and you understand. There's no ceremony for it, no grand acknowledgement, just an absence that settles in and becomes part of the landscape. You begin to feel a kind of tension that's different from before, not the anticipation of battle, but something more immediate, more personal. The threat isn't distant anymore. It's here. It's in the water you drink, the air you breathe, the ground you walk on. You wash your hands when you can, though the concept of proper hygiene feels almost out of reach here. You try to be careful to avoid obvious risks, but there's only so much control you have, and that lack of control is unsettling. At night, the sounds change. The coughing is harsher now, more frequent. Occasionally, you hear someone retching, the sound sharp and unmistakable. Others shift restlessly, unable to find comfort. Sleep becomes lighter. You wake more often, your body alert in a way that you can't fully explain. You glance around in the dim light, checking, almost unconsciously, that everything is still as it should be. But as it should be is starting to feel like a very low bar. You lie back down and stare into the darkness and try not to think too much about it, about how quickly things changed, about something invisible has managed to reshape the entire camp without a single command being given. You focus on your breathing. In, out, steady. For now. You're fine. For now.
But that phrase, those two small words, carry more weight than they used to, because you've seen what happens when "for now" runs out, and there's no clear way to know when or if that moment is coming for you. You pull your covering a little tighter, as if that might help, and close your eyes. The camp continues around you, coughing, shifting, enduring, and somewhere in that quiet, uneasy rhythm, a new understanding settles in. The battlefield isn't the only place where survival is uncertain. Sometimes the real fight is happening long before you ever hear a gunshot.
By the time you're led toward the medical tent, you already know one thing with absolute certainty. You don't want to be here. It's not just fear, it's recognition. The same way you learn to recognize the smell of camp or the taste of hardtack, you now recognize this place for what it is. Not a place of comfort, not even really a place of healing, but a place where outcomes are uncertain at best. And yet, here you are. Maybe it's your arm, swollen from infection. Maybe it's a fever that refuses to break. Or maybe you're just helping someone else, supporting their weight as they stumble forward, their steps uneven and slow. Either way, you cross that invisible line. Inside, the air changes. It's thicker, warmer, heavy with smells you can't quite separate. Blood, sweat, something sharp and chemical, and underneath it all, the unmistakable presence of sickness. It lingers in your throat as you breathe, making each inhale feel slightly wrong. You try not to react. Rows of cots stretch out in front of you, some occupied, some waiting. Men lie in various states of stillness, some staring blankly at the ceiling, others shifting restlessly, caught somewhere between pain and exhaustion. There's no quiet here. Not really. Low groans drift through the space, punctuated by the occasional sharper cry that cuts through everything else. Voices murmur, orders, reassurances, questions that don't always receive answers. This is what passes for a hospital. A real historical fact anchors itself here. Civil War surgeons often worked in makeshift conditions with limited supplies and overwhelming numbers of patients. Despite this, many were skilled and dedicated, but the environment they worked in made everything harder, riskier, and far less predictable. You watch as a surgeon moves from one patient to another, his motions efficient, almost mechanical. There's no wasted movement, no hesitation. He doesn't have time for that. Time is a luxury this place doesn't have. On a nearby table, instruments are laid out. Metal tools, simple in design but unmistakable in purpose. You don't need an explanation to understand what they're for. Amputations. The word settles heavily in your mind. You glance away quickly, but not before catching sight of a limb, separate now, no longer part of the man it belonged to. It's covered mostly, but the shape is clear enough. Your stomach tightens. Here's the part that feels almost unreal. Many amputations during the Civil War were performed without modern anesthesia as you'd know it today. Some patients received chloroform or ether, yes, but not always, and not always in sufficient amounts. Speed mattered. Precision mattered. Comfort was secondary. You hear it before you see it. A saw. The sound is distinct, rhythmic, controlled. It cuts through the air in a way that makes your entire body tense, every muscle tightening instinctively. You freeze. It's not loud exactly, but it's impossible to ignore. Each movement of the blade carries a weight that you feel more than you hear, like your body understands what's happening even if your mind tries to step away. Someone nearby turns their head, eyes wide, then quickly looks back down as if pretending not to notice will make it less real. It doesn't. You focus on your breathing again. In, out, steady. An odd detail surfaces, almost absurd in contrast to everything around you. Some surgeons prided themselves on how quickly they could perform an amputation, treating it almost like a measure of skill. Minutes mattered, not just for efficiency, but because the faster the procedure, the better the patient's chances. It's a strange thing to take pride in, but here it makes a certain kind of sense. You move further inside, guided by someone who barely has time to look at you properly. There's a system here, though it doesn't feel like one, more like controlled chaos, each person doing what they can when they can, with whatever they have. You're directed to a spot. Sit, wait. Those two words again, they follow you everywhere. As you sit, you start to notice the smaller details. A man gripping the edge of his cot, knuckles white as he braces against pain. Another whispering to himself, repeating the same phrase over and over, as if it might anchor him. You catch fragments of conversation. He'll make it. Keep pressure there. Hold still. Some of it sounds hopeful, some of it less so. Scholars still argue whether Civil War medical practices were more advanced than people assume, or more primitive than they should have been. The truth, sitting here, feels complicated. There's skill, yes, but also limitation. Knowledge, but not enough. Effort, but not always success. You realize something slowly as you watch all of this unfold. Survival here isn't just about avoiding injury. It's about enduring what comes after. Infection is a constant threat. Even a minor wound can turn serious if it isn't treated properly, or sometimes even if it is. The line between recovering and declining is thin, and it shifts without warning. You glance down at your own body, suddenly more aware of its fragility. Skin, muscle, bone, it all feels temporary in a way it didn't before. You're called forward. Your turn. The moment feels heavier than it should, your steps slower as you approach. The surgeon barely looks up at first, focused on his work. When he does, it's quick, a glance that takes you in, assesses, categorizes. You're no longer just you. You're a case, a problem to be solved, if possible. Hands move quickly, examining, pressing, deciding. Instructions are given. You try to follow them, though your mind is half elsewhere, still caught on the sounds, the smells, the weight of everything around you. Pain, when it comes, is sharp and immediate. You tense, gripping whatever you can, your breath catching as your body reacts before your thoughts can catch up. It passes, or at least it lessens. Time blurs again. Minutes stretch, compress, lose meaning. Eventually, you're moved aside, your treatment, whatever it was, complete, for now. For now. You're back among the others, but something feels different. You've crossed another line, seen something you can't quite unsee. The medical tent isn't just a place, it's a glimpse into what this war can do, not in grand, sweeping moments, but in quiet, brutal details. You sit there listening to the low hum of activity, the occasional sharp sound, the constant undercurrent of discomfort, and you understand more clearly than before that this isn't just about fighting, it's about enduring everything that comes with it, the visible and the invisible, the expected and the unimaginable. You close your eyes briefly, just for a moment, letting the noise blur into something distant. When you open them again, nothing has changed, and somehow, that's the hardest part. Eventually, the waiting ends, not with a grand announcement or a dramatic shift, but with orders, simple, direct, impossible to ignore. You're moving out. At first, it almost feels like relief. Anything is better than the endless repetition of camp life, the slow grind of hunger and sickness and boredom layered on top of each other. Movement means purpose, direction, something to focus on besides the quiet discomfort of existing. But that feeling doesn't last long, because movement comes with its own kind of misery. You pack what little you have, adjusting straps that never quite sit right on your shoulders. Your rifle feels heavier now, not because it's changed, but because you have. Weeks of poor nutrition and restless sleep have taken their toll, even if you didn't fully notice it at first. Now every ounce matters. The march begins early. Boots hit the ground in uneven rhythm, a long line of men stretching out ahead and behind you. Dust rises with each step, clinging to your clothes, settling on your skin, working its way into your mouth until you can taste it with every breath. You try to keep pace. At first, it's manageable. Your body falls into a rhythm. Step, step, step. Your mind narrowing its focus to the immediate task of moving forward. The world shrinks to the ground in front of you, the back of the man ahead, the steady weight of your gear. But time stretches, and the rhythm starts to wear on you. Your shoulders ache from the straps digging in. Your feet, already blistered from earlier days, begin to protest more loudly. Each step sends a small jolt upward, a reminder that your body isn't designed for this kind of constant strain. You keep going anyway, because stopping isn't really an option. A real historical fact anchors itself here. Civil War soldiers often marched long distances, sometimes 15 to 20 miles a day, carrying heavy equipment with limited rest. These marches could be as exhausting and dangerous as the battles themselves, especially for men already weakened by poor conditions. You start to understand why. The sun climbs higher, pressing down on you with steady persistence. Sweat soaks through your uniform, turning the rough fabric into something even more irritating. It clings to your skin, trapping heat, making every movement feel just a little bit harder. Water breaks are brief. Too brief. You drink quickly, not because you want to rush, but because you have to. There's never quite enough to feel satisfied, only enough to keep you moving. An odd detail catches your attention during one of these stops. Some soldiers remove their shoes to air out their feet, revealing blisters so severe they look almost unreal, raw, swollen, sometimes wrapped in makeshift bandages. A few even march barefoot for stretches, choosing the pain of the ground over the torture of ill-fitting boots. You consider it, then decide against it. For now. The march resumes. Step, step, step. The repetition becomes almost hypnotic, your mind drifting in and out. You think about nothing, then everything. Home flickers briefly in your mind. Familiar places, familiar faces, before fading again under the weight of the present. Because the present demands your attention. There are moments when the line slows, bunches up, then stretches out again. Commands ripple through the ranks, sometimes clear, sometimes distorted by distance and noise. You follow as best you can. That's all anyone can do. As the day wears on, the mood shifts. It's subtle at first, a quiet tightening. Conversations grow shorter, less frequent. The occasional joke doesn't quite land the way it used to. There's a sense, unspoken but shared, that you're getting closer to something. Something important. Something dangerous. You start to notice the signs. Distant sounds, faint at first, then a little clearer. Not quite recognizable, but enough to make you pause internally. The terrain changes slightly, the air carrying a different kind of weight. And then, unmistakably, gunfire. It's far off, dull pops that echo faintly across the distance, but there's no mistaking it. The sound cuts through everything else, snapping your focus into place. This is it. The march slows, then stops. Orders are given more sharply now, voices carrying a different tone, less casual, more urgent. You're told to prepare, to ready yourself. For what exactly? You already know. Your hands move almost automatically, checking your gear, adjusting your grip on your rifle. You try to steady your breathing, but it's different now. Quicker, shallower, your body responding to something your mind is still trying to process. Fear. Not the vague, distant kind you felt before. This is immediate, real. You glance around. Others are doing the same. Some focused, some visibly tense, a few trying to mask their nerves with forced calm. Scholars still argue whether soldiers in their first engagements felt more fear or more confusion. Standing here, listening to the distant crack of gunfire growing slightly louder,
It feels like the two are tangled together, impossible to separate. You move again, not in the loose, stretched-out line of a march, but in a more deliberate formation. The air feels heavier, each step carrying more weight than the last. The sounds ahead grow clearer. Gunfire, yes, but also something else. Shouting, the faint, chaotic noise of many things happening at once. Your world narrows further. No more drifting thoughts, no more idle observations. Just this. You reach a point where the terrain opens slightly, giving you a clearer sense of what's ahead. You don't see everything, not yet, but you see enough. Smoke, movement, the unmistakable signs of a battlefield. Your grip tightens. This is what all the waiting, all the discomfort, all the preparation has been leading to. And suddenly, the hardships of camp, the hunger, the lice, the boredom, they shift in your mind. They don't disappear, but they take on a new context. They were the beginning. This is something else entirely. You take another step forward, your heart beating louder than it should, your breath catching slightly as the reality settles in fully. There's no turning back now. Only forward, into the noise, into the smoke, into whatever comes next.
The noise doesn't hit you all at once. It builds. At first, it's just the gunfire you heard from a distance, sharp, cracking sounds that echo unevenly across the landscape. But as you move closer, more layers stack on top. Shouting, commands half heard and half understood, the low, constant hum of chaos that seems to vibrate through the ground itself. You step into it before you fully realize you have. And suddenly, everything feels closer, louder, faster. Smoke hangs in the air, thick enough to blur your vision. It stings your eyes, making you blink more than you want to. Each breath tastes faintly of something burnt, something metallic, something that doesn't belong in your lungs. You try to focus on your footing, on your rifle, on the vague shape of the line you're supposed to maintain. But the battlefield doesn't care about neat lines. It shifts, constantly. Men move forward, then hesitate, then move again. Some drop to the ground, not always because they've been hit, sometimes just to find any kind of cover. Others keep going, driven by momentum or orders or something deeper they can't quite name. You follow, because that's what you've been doing this entire time, following. A real historical fact settles in, heavy and immediate. Civil War battles were often fought at relatively close range compared to modern standards, sometimes just a few dozen yards apart. That closeness makes everything feel more personal, more intense, more impossible to ignore. You start to see faces, not clearly, not for long, but enough to register that there are people on the other side, moving, reacting, just like you. It's a strange, disorienting realization that flickers through your mind and then disappears under the pressure of everything else. There's no time to dwell on it. You're told to fire. Your hands move, almost automatically, going through motions you practiced in camp. Load, aim, fire. The recoil jolts through your shoulder, sharper than you remember from drills. The sound is louder here, layered with dozens, hundreds of other shots, merging into something continuous and overwhelming. You reload, again and again. Time fractures. Moments stretch and compress unpredictably. A few seconds can feel like minutes, while entire stretches seem to vanish from your memory entirely. You're aware of movement, of noise, of the constant need to do something, but the sequence blurs. You duck instinctively as something whizzes past, too fast to fully process. Your heart spikes, your breath catching as your body reacts before your mind can catch up. You're in it now, fully. There's an odd detail that stands out in the middle of all this chaos. Despite the noise, despite the constant motion, there are moments, brief, almost surreal, where everything seems to narrow to a single point. The click of your rifle mechanism, the feel of the trigger under your finger, the way your breath sounds in your own ears. It's not calm, but it's focused. You cling to that focus, because without it,
everything else is too much. You see someone fall. Not dramatically, not in slow motion, just one moment they're there, the next they're not standing anymore. It happens so quickly that your brain struggles to keep up, to assign meaning to what you just witnessed. You look away. There's no room for that right now. Scholars still argue whether soldiers truly understood what they were experiencing in the moment, or if their minds shielded them from the full reality until later. Standing here, moving, firing, reacting, it feels like you're operating on instinct more than understanding. Understanding can wait. Survival can't. The ground beneath you is uneven, churned up by movement, by impact, by everything happening at once. You stumble slightly, catching yourself before you fall, your grip tightening on your rifle as you steady yourself. Around you, the line shifts again. Forward. Always forward. The smoke thickens, then thins, then shifts with the wind. Shapes appear and disappear within it, making it hard to tell exactly where you are in relation to everything else. You rely on the people near you, on their movement, their reactions, because individual awareness only gets you so far. At some point, though you're not entirely sure when, the intensity begins to change. Not necessarily lessen, but shift. The rhythm of the firing alters. The movement becomes less constant, more uneven. It's not over, but it's different. You find yourself breathing harder than you realized, your chest rising and falling rapidly as your body tries to catch up with everything it's just been through. You look around, carefully. The field doesn't look like anything you've seen before. Not like camp, not like the march. It's the same ground, technically, but changed, marked by everything that's happened here, in ways that feel both obvious and impossible to fully process. People are moving, some quickly, some slowly, some being helped, others helping. The noise hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer a constant wall. It comes in bursts now, punctuated by moments of relative quiet. Relative, because nothing here is truly quiet. You realize, slowly, that you're still standing, that you made it through whatever that was. For now. That phrase again. Always that phrase. You lower your rifle slightly, your hands trembling just enough to notice. Not dramatically, not uncontrollably, just enough. An odd calm starts to settle in. Not peaceful, not comforting, but steady. Like your body's adjusting again, recalibrating after the storm. You think back, briefly, to the camp, to the hunger, the boredom, the constant low-level discomfort. It feels distant now, almost unreal in comparison to what you've just experienced. And yet, it's all connected. The rations that barely sustained you, the sickness that weakened you, the medical care that tried, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to hold everything together. The long marches that drained your strength before you ever reached this point. It all led here. And here doesn't feel like an end. It feels like a continuation. You take a slow breath, then another, letting your body settle as much as it can. Around you, the world keeps moving, adjusting, recovering, preparing for whatever comes next. Because there's always something next. But for this moment, this brief pause in the chaos, you allow yourself to simply stand, to exist, to acknowledge quietly that you're still here, and that in itself feels like something. The night comes more gently than you expect, not because the world has softened, but because your senses have. Everything that once felt sharp and overwhelming now drifts into something quieter, more distant. The sounds fade first, blending into a low murmur that no longer demands your full attention. You find a place to rest, if it can be called that. The ground is still hard, your body is still tired, but there's a different kind of stillness now, one that settles over you like a thin blanket, not enough to fully comfort, but enough to ease the edges. You lie back, staring up at the sky. It looks the same as it did before. That's the strange part. After everything, the hunger, the sickness, the noise, the fear, You half expect the world itself to look different, but the stars are still there, quiet and steady, untouched by everything below. You focus on them. Let your breathing slow. In, out, steady. Your thoughts drift, not in sharp, anxious bursts, but in softer waves, fragments of memory, pieces of the day, the echo of sounds that no longer feel immediate. They come and go, fading before they can fully take shape. Your body finally lets go. The tension in your shoulders eases, your grip loosens. Even the constant awareness, that alert, watchful feeling, starts to soften around the edges. You're still here. That's enough. For now. And as the night settles fully, wrapping everything in a quiet you haven't felt in a long time, you let your eyes close. Not because everything is okay, but because for this moment, you can rest.